So let's go back to December 8th, 2005. Tokyo. The Tokyo Stock Exchange, to be exact. It's a normal Thursday morning. Traders are at their desks, coffee is being consumed in industrial quantities, and a junior trader at a firm called Mizuho Securities, one of Japan's biggest financial institutions, is about to make the most expensive keyboard mistake in history. Here's what was supposed to happen. A company called JCOM was going public that day. It was their IPO, their first time trading on the stock exchange. And Mizuho had a client who wanted to buy one share, one single share, at 610,000 yen. Pretty straightforward, right? Now here's what actually happened. The trader typed the order in reverse. Instead of selling one share at 610,000 yen, he entered an order to sell 610,000 shares at 1 yen each. One share for 610,000 yen, or 610,000 shares for 1 yen. One tiny transposition. And in that moment, without realizing it, Mizuho had just offered to sell 41 times more shares than JCOM actually had in existence. Think about that for a second. They were selling shares that literally did not exist. And here's where it gets genuinely wild. Because this story isn't just about the typo. It's about everything that happened after the typo. The scramble, the failed fixes, the wolves that smelled blood in the water, and a legal battle that went all the way to Japan's Supreme Court. Within seconds of that order hitting the market, something strange started happening. Sharp-eyed traders and hedge funds noticed the glitch almost immediately. JCOM shares were being offered at basically nothing, 1 yen. That's less than a penny in US dollars at the time. And Wall Street, or in this case, the Tokyo version of it, did what Wall Street always does when it smells easy money. It pounced. Traders started buying up JCOM shares as fast as they possibly could. Buy at 1 yen, sell at actual market price, which was around 600,000 plus yen, and pocket the difference. It was essentially free money sitting on the table, and everyone was grabbing for it. Meanwhile, back at Mizuho, people were starting to notice something was very, very wrong. The confirmations were coming back. The numbers didn't make sense. Someone looked at the screen and had what I can only imagine was a complete out-of-body experience. They tried to cancel the order, multiple times. And here's where we add a second disaster on top of the first one. The Tokyo Stock Exchange's trading system had a bug, a glitch of their own. The cancellation requests weren't going through properly. Mizuho was essentially screaming, "Stop!" into a void while the machine kept executing the trade. Can you imagine watching millions of dollars evaporate in real time and being completely unable to do anything about it? By the time the dust settled, and we're talking about the span of roughly one afternoon, Mizuho had lost approximately 40 billion yen. At the exchange rate at the time, that translated to around $225 million. Gone. In one day. Because of one transposed number. Now this is where the story gets really interesting, because after a disaster like this, everybody wants to know the same thing. Who pays? Mizuho was furious, and not just embarrassed. They pointed the finger directly at the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Their argument was this: our system sent cancellation requests. Your system failed to process them. You had a known bug, and you didn't fix it in time. This is on you. The Tokyo Stock Exchange initially accepted some responsibility and agreed to pay a portion of the losses, around 10.7 billion yen. But Mizuho wanted more. They filed a lawsuit claiming the exchange should cover the full amount of damages resulting from the system failure. This legal battle dragged on for years, and I mean years. It eventually went to Japan's highest court, where the Supreme Court ultimately ruled that Mizuho bore primary responsibility for the original error, the typo, but that the Tokyo Stock Exchange did share liability for the failed cancellation system. The final split of damages became a massive point of legal debate, that set precedent for how exchanges handle technical failures going forward. But here's a detail most people skip over when they tell this story. There were other winners in this chaos who made out like absolute bandits. Remember all those traders who bought up JCOM shares at 1 yen? They were sitting on an absolute gold mine. When the market corrected and JCOM shares went back to their real price, those traders cashed out enormous profits. The Tokyo Stock Exchange actually asked, or rather strongly encouraged, those traders to voluntarily return their windfall profits. Some firms did. They returned about 2.7 billion yen voluntarily because the situation was so obviously caused by a glitch that keeping the money felt ethically dicey. But not everyone played ball. Several traders and funds kept their profits. And legally, they were largely in the clear. They had made legitimate market transactions. The fact that those transactions were enabled by someone else's catastrophic mistake wasn't technically their problem. It's one of those situations where something feels deeply unfair, but the law has a hard time disagreeing with it. You saw a price, you bought at that price, the transaction was valid. That's how markets work. It's kind of like finding a designer jacket at a garage sale for $2. You didn't steal it, you paid the asking price. But the person selling it is absolutely devastated. Now here's the part I find most valuable about this whole story. What actually changed as a result? This incident became a wake-up call for stock exchanges around the world, not just in Japan. The Tokyo Stock Exchange launched an immediate investigation, overhauled their cancellation systems, and put pressure checks in place that would flag orders that seemed statistically impossible. Like, hey, you're trying to sell 41 times the total shares that exist for this company. Maybe, let's double-check that. These kinds of safeguards are now called circuit breakers and fat finger filters in the trading world. Fat finger, that's actually the technical slang. A fat finger error is when a trader accidentally hits the wrong key or enters the wrong number. It's surprisingly common. And the JCOM disaster was the case study that convinced regulators to take it seriously at a systemic level. In the US, similar safeguards were already in development after some close calls, but this story accelerated the conversation globally. The idea that a single keystroke could destabilize a market, even briefly, was something exchanges were forced to confront head-on. Mizuho themselves implemented a completely new trade verification process. Before any large order is executed, there's now an internal check, a second set of eyes. A confirmation step that says, just to be absolutely sure, is this what you meant to do? Which raises an obvious question, right? Why wasn't that already in place? And that's honestly the part of this story that keeps me thinking. Because Mizuho wasn't some fly-by-night operation. This was, and is, one of the largest financial institutions in Japan. They had compliance teams, risk management systems, experienced traders. And yet one person, on one morning, typing one order into one screen, bypassed all of it. The lesson here isn't really about technology, or even about finance. It's about systems and human error. The most expensive mistakes in business history rarely happen because of complex, elaborate failures. They happen because of gaps between what we assume is being checked and what's actually being checked. Someone assumed the system would catch an impossible order. The system assumed someone had already reviewed it. And in that gap, between two assumptions, $225 million disappeared. There's a term in engineering called a single point of failure. It's a component in a system that, if it fails, takes the whole system down. In Mizuho's case, the single point of failure was one trader on one screen with no second confirmation required. After this incident, the entire financial industry started asking, where are our single points of failure? And more importantly, what are we doing about them? Remember when I said the people responsible knew something was wrong within minutes but couldn't stop it? That's the part that really haunts me. Because the system failed twice, once when the wrong order went in, and again when the right action couldn't get through. The Mizuho Fat Finger incident is now one of the most cited case studies in financial risk management courses around the world. It sits alongside a handful of other famous trading disasters, like the 2010 flash crash in the US, where algorithmic trading briefly wiped nearly $1 trillion off the market before recovering, as evidence that modern financial systems, for all their sophistication, are still vulnerable to remarkably simple failures. And what's wild is that fat finger errors still happen today. In 2014, a trader in France accidentally put in an order that was 100 times too large and briefly sent European markets into a mini panic. In 2018, a South Korean trading firm nearly went bankrupt. Actually, they did go bankrupt, from a similar kind of algorithmic error. The technology gets faster, the amounts get bigger, and the margin for human error doesn't really shrink. It just gets more expensive.
So what's the takeaway for regular people?
For business owners, entrepreneurs, anyone who isn't a financial trader, it's this: complexity doesn't protect you from simplicity. You can have the most sophisticated operation in the world, but if there's a step that relies entirely on one person being perfect in one moment, that's your vulnerability. Build in the checks, add the confirmation step, create the redundancy that feels unnecessary until the day it isn't. Because in business, the $225 million typo isn't always going to be a literal typo. Sometimes it's a contract that only one person reviewed. Sometimes it's a product launch where only one person checked the numbers. Sometimes it's a single point of failure hiding in plain sight, just waiting for one tired morning. So let's bring it back to where we started. One trader, one morning, one transposed number, and a cascade of failures. Technological, systemic, and human, that turned a routine IPO into one of the most expensive mistakes in business history. The trader wasn't malicious. He wasn't incompetent. He was a person, doing a job on a regular day. And the system around him wasn't built to catch what he couldn't catch himself. $225 million is an almost incomprehensible number. But the real cost of that typo wasn't measured in yen or dollars. It was measured in the total overhaul of how exchanges around the world think about risk, redundancy, and the terrifying speed at which a small mistake can become a catastrophic one. Next time you're about to send a big email, submit an important document, or finalize a major decision, maybe take one extra second. Read it twice. Get a second opinion. Because if this story teaches us anything, it's that the most expensive mistakes in the world usually start with something small enough to fit in a single text field. And if you want more stories like this, business disasters, surprising case studies, and the kind of behind-the-scenes stuff that doesn't make the headlines, go ahead and subscribe. I put out new videos every week, and trust me, this one barely scratches the surface of the wild things that happen in the world of business. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.